Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. Get ready for today's unnerving journey. It was Christmas night, and the silence in my neighborhood was almost eerie. Most of my neighbors were either out of town or asleep early after their celebrations. I was alone, enjoying the rare quiet. My parents were spending Christmas with relatives, and I'd stayed back to look after the house and catch up on some personal projects. The snow outside was falling steadily, and the glow of our Christmas lights reflected beautifully off the pristine white blanket. I was curled up on the couch, sipping tea, when I heard faint singing in the distance. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a carol, soft and lilting, barely audible over the hum of the heater. Curious, I muted the TV and listened. The singing grew louder, unmistakable now. It sounded like a group of carolers, which struck me as odd. Who would be out caroling this late, especially in a neighborhood that was almost empty? The melody was unfamiliar, haunting even. It wasn't a cheerful Christmas tune, but something slower, darker, almost mournful. My curiosity turned to unease. I peeked out the window but saw no one on the street. The singing seemed to be coming from somewhere nearby, yet the snowy road was empty. Then, a knock at the front door. I jumped, my tea sloshing over the rim of the cup. Setting it down, I approached the door cautiously, my heart pounding. Peering through the peephole, I saw a lone figure standing on the porch. It was a man, dressed in a heavy coat and scarf, his face partially obscured. I couldn't make out his features, but his posture was strange, too rigid, like he was forcing himself to stand still. "Can I help you?" I called through the door, trying to keep my voice steady. The singing stopped abruptly. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the man spoke, his voice calm and measured. "I'm looking for someone." I didn't reply immediately. His vague response sent a chill down my spine. "There's no one here but me," I said cautiously. He tilted his head slightly, as though considering my words. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said firmly, my hand tightening on the doorknob. He didn't move, didn't say anything else. Finally, I asked, "Who are you looking for?" This time, his answer came without hesitation. "You." My blood ran cold. I stumbled back from the door, my mind racing. Who was this man? Why was he here? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but before the operator could answer, the power in the house cut off. The Christmas lights went dark, and the glow from the streetlights outside disappeared, plunging everything into blackness. Panicked, I scrambled for a flashlight, my trembling hands making it nearly impossible to hold on to anything. I turned it on and aimed it at the door, but the man was gone. The singing started again, this time inside the house. My breath caught as the melody echoed softly through the halls. It wasn't possible. Every door was locked, every window shut. I backed into the kitchen, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The song grew louder, closer. I swung the light around wildly, trying to pinpoint the source. Then I saw it, a shadow, moving in the reflection of the kitchen window. I spun around, but no one was there. And then I heard his voice, low and steady, right behind me. "I told you I'd find you." The flashlight fell from my hands, the beam spinning wildly as I felt a hand on my shoulder. 2 weeks later, when my parents returned, the house was empty. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just the faint imprint of footsteps in the snow leading to the door. And on the kitchen counter they found a handwritten note. You shouldn't have ignored the carols. I never thought spending Christmas alone would feel this unsettling. My parents were out of town, visiting my grandparents, and I insisted I'd be fine. A 22-year-old college student doesn't need babysitting, right? Besides, I had a mountain of assignments to finish, and the peace and quiet of our house sounded like the perfect setting. The first evening was uneventful. I decorated a tiny plastic Christmas tree in the corner of the living room and treated myself to some hot chocolate while binge-watching old Christmas movies. Snow had begun to fall heavily outside, blanketing the street in silence. Around 11 p.m., I decided to call it a night. The house was eerily quiet, but it was nothing new. I'd grown up here and knew every creak and groan. I locked the front door, double-checked the windows, and headed upstairs. I had just settled into bed when I heard it, a faint sound, like someone shuffling across the driveway. I froze. The sound wasn't loud enough to be a car or a passerby, but it was deliberate. I dismissed it as the wind or maybe a stray cat. But then it came again. This time, it was a distinct crunching noise, someone stepping on the freshly fallen snow. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window. The porch light illuminated the front yard, but it was empty. The driveway was pristine, except for a single set of footprints leading up to the front door. My stomach dropped. I checked the door from the top of the stairs. It was still locked. Mustering my courage, I tiptoed downstairs and peered through the peephole. Nobody was there. I sort of thought that they might, so, hanging my head down to hide my scream, I searched the kitchen and the hallway. I turned off all the lights in the house and retreated upstairs, my heart pounding. I tried convincing myself it was just a delivery person or a neighbor, though I knew it didn't make sense. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. A text message. I reached for it, and my blood ran cold. The message was from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas. Nice decorations." My heart thudded in my chest as I stared at the screen. How could they know? I bolted out of bed and checked every window upstairs. Curtains drawn, lights off. I was certain nobody could see inside. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? A cryptic message and some footprints? Suddenly, there was a loud thud from downstairs. It sounded like something heavy had been dropped. My throat tightened. Grabbing the heaviest object I could find, a floor lamp, I crept downstairs, every step feeling like an eternity. The living room was untouched. The front door was still locked. Then I noticed the kitchen light was on. I didn't leave that on. As I stepped into the kitchen, the floor creaked beneath me. The back door stood wide open, the cold winter air spilling into the house. Snowflakes were blowing in, and there were wet footprints leading from the door to the fridge. My shaking hands dialed 911 as I backed out of the room, unable to take my eyes off the footprints. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, who assured me an officer would be there shortly. But before I could hang up, I heard a faint click. The fridge door. Something moved behind it. I froze, the phone slipping from my hand. Slowly, the door creaked open, revealing nothing but an empty shelf where my leftovers had been. But I knew someone had been there. The sound of sirens finally broke the suffocating silence. I ran to the front door and unlocked it, throwing myself into the arms of the arriving officer. After a thorough search, the police found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, and certainly no intruder. It was as if the whole thing had been in my head. But as I stood on the porch, staring at the snow-covered driveway, I noticed something chilling. The single set of footprints from earlier, now there were two, side by side, leading away from the house. The officer assured me it was probably a prank or a misunderstanding, but I knew better. Someone had been inside, watching me, and they had left only when they wanted to. For the rest of that Christmas, I couldn't sleep, and every time I glanced out the window, I half expected to see someone standing there in the snow, waiting for me to turn off the lights. Christmas Eve was always my favorite night of the year, but this time, I was alone. My parents were visiting family out of town, and I had volunteered to house sit. I wasn't too bothered. Our quiet suburban neighborhood wasn't exactly the setting for a crime thriller, as the North Asylum proper really wasn't. By 10 p.m., the streets were silent except for the occasional crunch of snow under a passing car. I turned off the living room lights and headed to bed, leaving the glow of our Christmas tree to cast soft, warm light across the house. Just as I was settling under the covers, I heard the doorbell ring. I froze. Who would show up this late? Grabbing my phone, I crept downstairs. Peeking through the window beside the door, I saw a delivery driver in a red jacket holding a package. He was facing away, his head down like he was shielding himself from the cold. Cautiously, I opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" The man turned slightly, his face still obscured by a baseball cap. "Package for you," he said, his voice low and clipped. I hadn't ordered anything, but I chalked it up to a Christmas mix-up. "You must have the wrong house," I said, starting to close the door. He put a foot forward, stopping it. "This address, see?" He held up a clipboard, and, sure enough, my name and address were scrawled on it. A chill ran through me, and not from the cold. Something about the situation didn't feel right. "I didn't order anything. You should leave," I said firmly, slamming the door shut and locking it. I retreated to the kitchen, my heart pounding. Through the window, I saw the man standing on the porch, unmoving. Then, slowly, he walked away toward the street. I relieved. I turned off the porch light and went back upstairs. But an hour later, as I lay in bed, I heard the distinct sound of a window sliding open. My stomach dropped. Grabbing my phone, I locked my bedroom door and called 911, whispering to the dispatcher about the intruder. They assured me officers were on their way. I stood there, barely breathing, as heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Whoever it was, they were inside. The footsteps stopped outside my door. My heart thundered as the knob turned, but the lock held. A moment later, the sound of retreating steps and the distant creak of a door closing told me they were leaving. When the police arrived, they found the house empty, but something was wrong. A chair had been moved to beneath the kitchen window, and a note was taped to the fridge. "Locked doors can't save you." The officers searched the area but found no one. They advised me to stay somewhere else for the night, which I gladly did. A week later, my parents returned home, and life went back to normal, or so I thought. One evening, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the dining table, there was a small wrapped gift with no tag. Inside was a single key. It fit our front door perfectly. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.